Welcome back, fans, to another edition of Memory Card, a Level 30 Games podcast that takes place at the newest titles while drawing a line back on those classics. I'm your host, Metroid Drew, and today with me I got Tom Prime.
Yes, like a steak. I like it.
Which gives you the clue of what we're going to be talking about today in Slot 1, which is our Metroid Prime 4 that we've waited how many long years?
I think you waited a lot harder than I did, but 18, was it?
Yes.
No, it came out in 2017. It was announced, so we've waited a long. Well, we waited a long time.
Yeah, eight years plus whatever it was. I know I saw a post on some forum that someone like 2020 was like, I can't wait for Metroid Prime 4 and like listed all the the details of what they were excited for, and then I think none of those hit. It was like making that dartboard of bingo, and you like threw darts and they just literally missed the board completely, right? So Metroid Prime 4 brings a brand new change to the core franchise from an open world, which we've seen in the past with some games going from Mario Super Nintendo to Mario 64 of an open world. All right, and we also get a lot of other things. Let's just start with the open world. What were your thoughts, Tom?
On the open world specifically, oh man, was that world open, and did that world need to be closed? It was there. I don't think it was as egregiously bad as reviews had made it out to be, but it does feel kind of pointless. And I know we always talk about games that like go on and on and on, and even to the point where, wow, we love this game, but we hit 40 hours and we kind of wish it was over. This was a game that felt longer than it really was, and I think part of it has to do with that open world. And like when I got my runtime at the end, as Metroid is kind of known for having your completion time up on the screen, I was like, I could have sworn I played this for twice as long as I actually did. It is not the best addition to the series or franchise, and I think Nintendo has since in the last few weeks has kind of come out and said that they knew that was a less than stellar addition, but they didn't want to take any longer on this game and kind of left it there. But I certainly don't think it was for the better.
Yeah, I always feel like when I'm playing a Metroid game, I have the exact same feeling of like, I played this for a lot longer than what the time says. Every time I go back to Super Metroid or I go back to Metroid Prime, it'll be like, oh, like real time, you're like playing for 3-4 hours, but in game for whatever reason, it says like an hour and a half to 2. It's just kind of interesting how it's been a long standing thing of Metroid where your time that you're playing it and the time in game never coincide for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think it's a mental thing. I think because there's a lot of backtracking and there's a lot of revisiting areas, and I think there can be a sense of repetition that sits in that does elongate the sense of time that passes versus what really happens.
So with that vast emptiness of open world, the only thing I could equate it to was very slightly was Wind Waker, when you were floating your boat around and there was little spots where X marks the spot and you would get treasure, which happened very few times. And then you also had all of these crystals that were just lying around that you were collecting and then inserting into the Tree of Life. And magically, when you had like 50%, it gave you an item. And when you got 100%, it did nothing. It was like, okay, I don't know why I wasted my time. But it's just, I feel like with this open world, like if you played any of the older Metroids, there used to be like sequence breaking. Like you would go to an area and you'd get an object, an ability, and you'd be able to traverse either with a bomb jump or whatever it may be to get to somewhere else. Well, this didn't have it because they were all so individualized with this motorcycle that you had to drive back and forth.
Yeah, someone I work with was like, "Hey, are you playing it? Is it any good?" And I think they caught me early enough in my playtime where I was like, "Yeah, it's actually really good. I've been enjoying it, and I can see where there's quibbles, but they're not as bad as everyone thinks. And then I played the game for like another 10 hours and I was like, oh, I hope he didn't buy this based on my recommendation. But I kind of sold him. I was like, hey, this is the best traditional 3D Zelda game that we've had in a long time, because that's kind of what it feels like or felt like to me. Um, the desert was kind of Hyrule Field, and you would travel to these different, I guess, biomes that were all, related to Metroid staples. You got your lava, and you got your ice, and you got your forest, all of which are also Zelda dungeons, by the way. But like the areas you went to didn't feel like areas because they were a little linear with some very mild puzzle solving. So to me, they were less biomes, and it wasn't like you were fully exploring these new areas. It was kind of like, cool, you're in the volcano, so this is the fire dungeon from Zelda, where you're kind of completing things, unlocking things to make progress, and then you get to your boss and have your battle, and you get that new power up, and it allows you to do something different in another area or access a different part of another area or a new area altogether. So like this had a lot of Zelda DNA to it, and I think from that lens it made it probably a little bit more bearable for me, but I'm a huge Zelda fan, so I think if you were expecting something more even like Metroid Prime 1, it probably didn't feel like a Metroid game. And yeah.
I think it changed hands in the development, didn't it?
Yes, I forget who originally had it. Bandai Namco, I think, was starting work on it, and then like 2 years into it, Nintendo's like, yeah, it's not good, so we're yanking it and starting over, and they gave it back to Retro. So I don't know what they took within those first 2 years, but there's a lot they do really well. It's just,
Yeah, I agree with the biomes are the usual ones. The thing I didn't like about them was like you walked like a third of the way through a biome, and it was like, oh, gotta get the ice beam, backtrack out, go to some other place, get an ice beam, and then come back later. So there was a lot of backtracking, I felt like, where that happened years ago with like Metroid Fusion, which we'll talk a little bit about in the second slot. But there was like all these different biomes, and it was the same thing. It was one space station, and each one had their own thing, and you are actually going back and forth because the plot actually forced you to. When it came to this game, though, I agree with you. Like, it sunk teeth into me in the opening scene. Like, it felt very exciting, and then you got to this other planet that they were like Chronos Tower, and you're just like, where am I? Like, why is it titled? Well, why is it important? But like, no one explains anything because you're now the sole person after this 10-minute intro of basically like Halo ODST meets Gears of War. Like, exciting because you're actually interacting with humans that normally doesn't happen in a Metroid game. Normally it's very quiet and atmospheric. You're trying to navigate the space station with the lights off, and then you turn them on and like creatures start coming out after you. So it definitely made a first impression, but it wasn't long lasting.
Yeah, I think even after the first, what was basically the tutorial area, when you're kind of fighting alongside the Federation force, and I guess, what is that when Sylix shows up for the first time, and you're like, oh, okay, cool, there's the big bad. But when they kind of dump you on that planet, and you do that tower, which jokingly has been referred to as like Vagina Tower because all the doorways are shaped like. Anyway, like
I thought that, but yes, okay. Continue.
So the first area you kind of go to, Fury Green, was really the moment where I was like, okay, this team still has it in regards to that tone and the ambience. They do such a good job with the sound design, and I mean graphically, the best way I can explain this, the way this looks and feels, it's kind of like if you've ever seen. Here's our high fantasy game that we're going to create, and this is the concept art. Metroid Prime 4 looks like concept art brought to life, and it's not quite like 100% like realistic. Like there's an element to it that I can't quite put my finger on, where it just it is really gorgeous in a lot of ways, and they do such a smart job with lighting and the sound design, and of course, I mean, she controls as we expect, and it felt really good to kind of be back in those those boots. So like the opening aspect of the game, like really was like, okay, you know what, cool, like I can get in on this, and then the rest of the game kind of happened.
Yeah, so the normal trope of every Metroid is you have all the abilities and you go through this sequence and then you get stripped of it as soon as something fails. And then they add in this new feature of like psychic abilities, which were interesting, but at the same time you use them very sporadically. Like I think there was an hour or two that I went through and then got to a point and it was like, oh, I forgot I can control this beam
Yeah.
and navigate through this area to hit a target on the opposite wall through a little like Womp Rat Star Wars style going through the Death Star. Like
Yeah.
it kills me when games introduce features and then use it for like the first hour and then it disappears and then it reappears at like the most inconvenient time where you're like, I forgot I even had it. What am I doing?
Which is odd because from a like Nintendo philosophy, I mean, like I feel like 2D Mario games are like, here's a concept for a level and then that's it. Like, and you're never gonna have that again. And it was like a really cool moment. But somehow in this one, psychic abilities, I guess, sounds really cool. But when 90% of the time I'm using it to like move a switch that I can just go over and like, why can't I just go flick it? Like, why do I have to use my psychic abilities? Why do I need to scan half the stuff I need to scan? Like, there's a lot of design choices that maybe are authentic to what they were trying to do from a sci-fi setting, but like also just made some things not a lot of fun. Like, why did using an elevator have to involve scanning something and then using like another ability to access it, but then you have to interact with it and now you're waiting for it? Like, this should not be a 3-step process to click a button so I can go down a level.
Yeah, we had that conversation about scanning from the first 3 Metroids. Like, I'm a person who, even though I don't need it, I don't need all the lore of every single creature and every little object. Like, you just know that there's going to be that chance where you have to scan something, then shoot it, then, yeah, with a missile, then scan it again, or whatever it is. It just is ingrained in you at this point of 4 games in the series that you just scan everything. But it is frustrating as a 3-step process. Whereas, like, in the past, you'd shoot a door, and it would load pretty quickly. And now, in this game, like, you're traversing from different biomes, and there are loading screens. And, like, I know I'm a huge proponent on no loading screens. Like, I know it's not...
You hate loading screens.
It's not feasible.
We gotta put that on a t-shirt for you.
No loading screens.
No loading screens.
It's not that I, like, absolutely despise them. It's just, like, I loved in Metroid Prime 1 and 2 that you hid them behind a door. Like, I'd much rather wait a second behind a door than you going to a black screen that I don't even think it had, like, a loading, like, Metroid, like, in the ball or in Viola or whatever across the screen. It just was, like, let me load these assets. And go ahead.
There were a couple that had like they were animation based, which I did think like reminded me of Metroid Prime, Metroid Dread. Like, okay, I got to get on this, like, I don't know, what was it, like a subway or something, and like it would be you riding it, but that would effectively be the loading screen. There were a couple times here where it's like, okay, I got to get into this place, so let me drive my stupid motorcycle to a podium so it locks in.
Yeah.
And then I gun the acceleration so that it raises the platform. And the first time I'm like, oh, damn, okay, this is going to be cool. Because then it jets you off, but it immediately cuts to like a short cinematic of you riding the motorcycle down a tunnel. And that's the loading screen. And I'm like, oh, well, that was anticlimactic.
Yeah.
I can't wait to do that 30 more times. I have to come back to this place. Like, that's what I mean. Like, there's a lot of brilliance here, and then there's a lot of just dumb game mechanics kind of shoehorned in here that just really don't add anything monumental to the experience.
Yeah, it really took you out of the, like, even though it wasn't combat at the time, just, like, the element of the game because you're just like, okay, let me wait as this revs up and then get to the next zone. Let's talk about Viola, right? Like, this is the first time in a 3D Metroid game that we're introducing a vehicle that you can summon at will in certain areas.
Well, hold on. Only after you pass a driver's license test in this facility that somehow has a 3-stage, 3-tier racetrack on it. What was that all about? I was like, this is the most like out of left field moment in this game. Okay, cool. Thank you.
I just felt like we were in Mario Kart Rainbow Road. Like, all of a sudden you have boost, and then you have the boost break like destroy.
Akira slide?
Yeah, the Akira slide, and that was another move that later on in the game I was like, I forgot I even had it. There was a literal boss in the open world that you had to defeat that way. And
the little like sandworm guy, or the big sandworm guy.
Shooting him for like 10 minutes, and I'm like, what am I missing? And then somehow I did damage by accident. I must have like shaken, I don't know, but I was just like, that move has not been relevant for hours.
Yeah, I don't think I even used it to break the crystal shards. I just kept missing the crystal shards and driving around in figure eights to try and hit them, because sometimes the hit detection would just be really poor and you'd have like one little fraction of a thing and you're like, God, really? You couldn't include that little bit? I have to circle around for that. But yeah, no, Viola was a weird addition. But again, remember, they were making this in 2017, and that was Nintendo's year of let's shove motorcycles and stuff like Breath of the Wild and I guess Metroid.
Yeah, I feel like with the motorcycle, they were just shooting for like an F-Zero or a Tron field. It was just something that, I don't know, we needed a transport system that wasn't the morph ball, which, like, we already have the morph ball. Couldn't you have just made, I don't know, a one-wheeled vehicle?
A unicycle? I mean, I think clearly it was hey, we have this big open desert and people are going to cross it a whole bunch. How could we speed this process up? Well, let's give them a bike. Okay, all right, like, sure, that is helpful. But then some of the lore behind the characters, or like the planet you're on, is like, we're a civilization that creates incredible technology, like our motorcycle. And I'm like, really? Okay, sure, the motorcycle civilization I need to save. I mean, there were some cool story elements, but like not enough to where by the end I even really cared. I'm just like, let me Metroid. I just,
Metroid. Talk about the best technology ever. Let me get in this pod and literally get mortared to the opposite side of the world and then just escape and start walking again.
Wait, hold on. Nope. You had like 2 loading screens before then. Right? Because they had to show the cannon firing and then it flying through the air, and then somehow with pinpoint precision the other cannon receiving it, and then like that was a spam A until like I can skip this cutscene every time, and even then it still showed you parts of it. It was really frustrating.
This game was, very interesting. A hodgepodge of things that they did. One of the things I want to get into, because we haven't even touched on combat, is the new beams, precision aiming, psychic abilities, right? Like, the one thing I found really satisfying was that even though you could target something, you could actually now use, I think it's your right analog stick, to drift off of that object and shoot it more precisely, which was a great addition. But again, it was not used very much until, like, the final boss was Psylocke. I was so mad because the entire game I'm like, I just lock on things, and, like, most of the bosses, right, you'd have to shift your aim just very slightly. But Psylocke, you literally had to aim at him and, like, move as far to the left to get one of these, like, Hydra heads. And it was, again, another gimmick that you lose the value when it's not being encompassed throughout.
Yeah, I think, again, it speaks to kind of some of the design decisions where when you have, especially a boss fight that's supposed to be kind of a culmination of what you've learned playing the game, for you to have several moments in that fight where you're like, oh yeah, I forgot I can do that. Or oh, that it didn't occur to me to try that because 95% of the game I didn't need to. Kind of speaks volumes to the new mechanics and how kind of useless they were overall until they were really forced in there.
I
I did like the boss fights overall, though. I thought they were really good. There were a couple that genuinely, like, kind of stumped me as to, am I doing this the right way? And, like, but not in a frustrating way, at least not at first. Because there was one where I think you're, like, shooting a beetle underground, and, like, that one was a colossal pain in the ass. Even Silux, I at the end, I'm like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to use, and I'm like, that makes sense. If I was actually paying attention, I probably would have realized that. But I think I was like, let me just beat this freaking game and get it off my playlist. But like, I did enjoy the bass battles were a highlight for me for the most part.
Yeah, I enjoy them. They always bring a unique perspective, but there's always that final boss, whether it's Metroid Prime 1 or I think 3, where you're like this 4-phase boss, like everyone else is 1 or 2, and then all of a sudden you're just like, I have to like drag on by fighting him for minutes upon minutes, and it's just like, it feels like a button smasher at that point when the rest of the game wasn't that way.
Especially when, and I guess spoilers, we didn't do a spoiler warning, but the midsection of that Silux fight was like a 3D rail shooter. Like all of a sudden I'm like, what? I'm flying through space and okay, cool. I guess kind of ducking through things. That from a control standpoint, like didn't feel good. Because I never felt like I was actually actively getting out of the way of stuff. I was just like, I hope I'm close enough to the edge, and
Yeah.
that section didn't really work for me very well.
Yeah, that was like Rez. I don't know if you've ever played that back in the game where you're like flying around and shooting on rails. But the same thing goes with like Breath of the Wild at the end. You were on horseback fighting this boss when normally you want the game to just be a sword slashing.
Yeah, I mean, the other part with combat for me was at some point in the game, I realized outside of the like robots that actively go out of their way to like hurt you, every other creature in the game you can just stand next to and they kind of leave you alone. Like they don't do anything. There wasn't really that threat from like Metroid Prime 1, I think, is a great example where it genuinely felt like you are in the habitat of this creature and it's defending itself from you. You are the threat here, and it's doing its best to protect itself. And I didn't get that. Like there were bugs that I was literally like, oh, what a cute little guy, and I just kind of like hopped over them so that I'm like, all right, cool, pacifist run, let's go. And I didn't do a lot of combat outside of the moments where it was kind of required.
That was the epiphany Joe and I came to last month with Kirby. It was that like Waddle Dees and Waddle Doos just like mind their own business and just like walk at you and end up being that Kirby is the enemy because he's the one trouncing their town.
He's decimating the population of Waddle Dees by eating them.
So one thing on the combat I did enjoy was, even though we had Ice Beam and some of the other things in the past, or Ice Missiles, right?
Yeah.
You got to charge them up, and when you charge them up, they were potent, and
Yes.
you destroyed some of those robots that were aggressively attacking you. I don't know how many times I was trying to run through something, and like the robot, the wall turrets that just like pop out are
Yeah.
like launching missiles, and I'm just like, this is very aggressive for a defense system.
Yeah, those got me every time. And it was at one point, I guess it's kind of designed to be pretty powerful because at one point I was like, wow, I've really gotten a lot of like missile upgrades, and I almost never get those in Metroid games unless they're pretty obvious because they are pretty well hidden for the most part. They're not as hidden in this one. So I was like, all right, I got 130 missiles. I guess that's cool. So you can spare a couple like 30 scope missile launches at big enemies and do pretty well.
I did like that. Brought up a point that I remember is the aspect of you scan this little robot that's hidden throughout each biome, that after you activate him, it tells you where every item is in the biome.
Are you talking about that little thing you have to shoot it with like an electric missile or whatever, and then it launches into the air? I think I did that for one section, but at that stage you get the electric beam, I think, towards the end, right?
Yeah, that was the
I
weird part.
I was like, I'm not going back. I'm not. I don't care if I forgot
Uh,
stuff
I,
in
I
there.
had 100%ed all the items. They were way too easy to acquire. In the older games, it was a much bigger task to get things. I think one of the hardest items I could not get for a while was the morph ball jump because it is nothing like in the past. Not even in Metroid Prime 1, where it was like really easy to time the morph ball bombs.
Yeah, it was really. Yeah, I couldn't. I couldn't. I had a hard time doing it.
They always do a good job of all the sounds, right? Saving has not changed. Acquiring items has not changed. Uh, the last thing I think that always baffles me is how this view roast alien tech just magically works with Samus's suit.
Yeah, I guess like Samus' suit is like the Linux of the future because everything just seems to work well with it until it probably doesn't. That's why she loses all her stuff every time is because Linux is not compatible on that planet and she has to reprogram everything as she finds it, right?
I can't wait for Joe to listen to this.
Well, and that was another frustrating part, right? Because you get like I got the fire beam chip whatever and you had to bring it back to like your camp in order for Miles McKenzie to be like, let me just burp this in the computer and then give it back to you. But I didn't play a lot of the other Prime games, but even I was like, wait a minute. In the first game, she's just like, oh, cool, and shoves it in her arm and it works. Like, why do we need to go back to this guy? That was a little spoon fed, which takes me to my biggest annoyance of the
That's
game
what
as
I
a
wanted
whole.
to
And
end on.
it's a petty one, but that's why it's my biggest one. Anytime you got something like that, it would pop up and say, maybe you should go to your camp. And it forced you to open your map because if you didn't, there was green text in the middle of your screen that said minus open map. It needed to show you where your camp was every single time you got something that you had to head back there for. And I was like, dude, I know where the camp is. I'm going to ignore this. And I drove around in the desert for like a half an hour with it annoyingly saying open map in the middle of my screen because it wanted to show me where my camp was. I've done this 7 times. Leave me alone.
My only minor, I mean, this is most of this game is more than a minor annoyance, but
I think, all right, I got to comment on that next, but go ahead.
my biggest pet peeve was every time you went to your camp or talked to some person that's on view roast that you're saving, they have to open their mask and you see this like human head in this suit of armor and it just takes you out of the moment. Like, I miss the days of Halo ODST where, like, you're talking to someone else. I don't need to see your face. I don't need to see your mouth move. Also, you're the nerdiest guy I've ever met, Mackenzie. But, like, Ezra Duke, you're okay in my book because that was, like, Gears of War all over again.
Was
But
that the guy that
don't-
was like the injured sniper?
Yeah, no. The guy who was in the volcano with the cigar. And the younger girl.
Oh, the fangirl. Okay.
Yeah, that also. Oh my god. But yeah, I just needed like.
See, I didn't mind the faces as much. I thought it was odd that they did it once. Like, I thought they would have gone back to it again. Like, I think it actually was kind of nice to humanize them a little bit, to show that they're people and not just like kind of droids. So I didn't mind it, but like it did the second or third time I was like, oh, got to open it for a splash and like get that breath of fresh air, then close it. So
Luckily, we can breathe on Vuros.
Right. It felt out of place, but I think the intent was good, so it didn't bother me as much.
All right, so go back to your point that you were gonna speak.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I think this game is made up of some really great stuff, a large number of minor annoyances that of course get blown out of proportion on the internet. So I don't think this is a bad game. I don't think it's a great game. I think it's a good game. And for a Metroid game that we've been waiting, 18 years for and, 8 since it's been announced, like I don't know if like it would have ever met expectations. So I think with what we got, I think all right, cool. As a 9 to 12 hour like romp as Samus. Like, I think it's fine. So I just think there are a lot of the systems and gameplay mechanics that are just very confusing to me in 2025/6 that I think if given an opportunity, if they said, all right, you know what, Retro, like, we know that this was not a good development cycle. Take Prime 5, build your vision from the ground up. I think that's when we're going to see something really special. So if this becomes a stopgap to something better, I think it'd be worth it. Because I think it's clear that Retro still is the chops. They nailed tone, I think, really, really well in this, and there are some pretty moments, and the sound design is great, and it controls great. They just got hampered by a lot of like dated gameplay mechanics or things that I think upon closer inspection or doing or having to do 50 times just wasn't fun. I think they can work that stuff out. So, that small stuff did add up pretty quickly, though.
Yeah, that's my hope in the future of Metroid series is like Metroid Dread came out and I was super excited. I love the game. They have the assets for a 2D Metroid. That looks great. Now we have the assets for a Metroid 3D game on a current gen. Like, I am more than okay. Go ahead.
I was going to say, that's the other thing. This was built for Switch 1, right? And, like, it still looks really, really pretty, even on a Switch 1. I played it on Switch 2, but it looks good on a Switch 1. The game, they got it to run at 60 frames a second on Switch 1, which, I mean, developers can't seem to do ever, even if it's like a 2D remake of something. So, like, if they said, all right, Switch 2, like, here's your dev kit, ground up, go, I think the next one could be really special.
Now that we've scanned enough aspects of Prime 4 in Slot 1, we'll delete some Kirby data from last month. And we'll see you in our Metroid series game that brought us the most nostalgia.